Big mistake. She publicly slapped the millionaire's black wife. A moment later, she was begging for. One moment, the ballroom was alive, glasses clinking, laughter echoing off crystal chandeliers, music swelling with the kind of polished grace only money can buy. The next, it was so silent you could hear the soft drip of champagne sliding down a forgotten flute, all because of one sound. Smack. Nobody could believe what they'd just witnessed, a woman bold or foolish enough to slap the millionaire's wife. And not in private, not behind closed doors. No, she did it in front of cameras, investors, and half the city's elite. The kind of mistake you don't come back from. Now, don't get me wrong. This wasn't just another catty social squabble. This was deeper, uglier. It wasn't about spilled drinks or a petty argument over attention. This was about power, about prejudice, about pride colliding headfirst with dignity in the worst possible way. At the center of this storm was Amara. Graceful, brilliant, the kind of woman who walks into a room and owns it without even trying. But she didn't fit the mold the old money crowd liked to worship. She was too smart, too unapologetic, and, yes, too black for their comfort. They smiled in her face while quietly hoping she'd trip. They underestimated her. Big mistake. And then there was Marcus, self-made millionaire. The kind of man whose name carried weight not because of inheritance, but because he built his empire from the ground up. Protective, respected, and absolutely unwilling to let anyone lay a hand or an insult on his wife. You see, Marcus wasn't just a man with wealth. He was a man with power. And there's a difference. So when that slap echoed across the ballroom, it wasn't just Amara who'd been disrespected. It was Marcus too. And everyone knew what that meant. But here's where it gets good. Because by the end of that night, the woman who thought she could humiliate Amara in public, she was the one humiliated. Where she was the one begging for forgiveness she didn't deserve, begging for the very reputation she had so carelessly shattered, begging to undo a mistake that would haunt her far longer than the sting of a handprint ever could. And the best part, Amara never had to raise her voice. So if you're sitting there, already leaning closer to your screen, trust me, you're going to want to hear how this all plays out. Because this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about the kind of justice that doesn't just land, it lingers. Hey, if you love stories where justice isn't just served, it's iced, plated, and served with a silver fork, make sure you hit subscribe. These videos take hours of writing, editing, and, honestly, recovering from secondhand rage, so your support seriously means the world. Now, let's dive in. Marcus didn't come from money. That's the part people always seem to forget or maybe conveniently ignore. He wasn't born into estates and trust funds. He was born with grit, the kind of man who worked 16-hour days, failed more times than he cared to admit, and still stood back up until he made it. By the time he turned 35, he wasn't just wealthy, he was respected. Not just for his empire, but for the way he gave back scholarships, housing programs, foundations with his name attached but never flaunted. And beside him, always, was Amara. If Marcus was the storm, she was the stillness in the eye of it. She had style, intelligence, and that rare kind of presence that made people stop mid-sentence just to watch her walk by. She was the one who made the glamorous look effortless, who could silence a room with nothing more than a glance. Some adored her for it. Others envied her for it. You see, in their world, the glittering world of galas, fundraisers, and social climbing, Amara stood out. Not because she tried to, but because she didn't bend herself to fit the mold. And to the old money crowd, that was almost unforgivable. She wasn't part of their families. She wasn't part of their circles. And though no one said it out loud, she was also black in a room full of people who smiled politely while clutching their pearls. That silent judgment? Amara felt it, but she never let it pierce her. She wore it like a crown, proof that she belonged in spaces they thought they could gatekeep. Enter Serena. Now, Serena wasn't old money either. But she had ambition so sharp it could cut glass, and a desperation to prove she was above Amara. To her, Amara was a threat, a reminder that class and status weren't enough to buy grace or respect. Serena couldn't stand it, so she made herself Amara's shadow. Not the flattering kind, either the kind that lingers behind you, waiting for a chance to swallow the light. At tea parties, Serena would lean in with her sugary voice, offering compliments that were dipped in venom. "Oh, Amara, that dress is gorgeous. It almost looks designer. Wow, you speak so well. Marcus must love how polished you make him look." You get the picture. Little digs, always disguised as jokes, always loud enough for people nearby to hear, but subtle enough that calling her out would look petty. But Amara, She never flinched. She'd smile, tilt her head, and move on as though Serena's barbs were no more significant than a mosquito's buzz. And honestly, that infuriated Serena even more. Because nothing cuts a bully deeper than indifference. The thing is, envy has a way of festering. Serena wasn't content just to whisper in corners. She wanted an audience. She wanted to prove, once and for all, that she could bring Amara down a peg. What she didn't realize was this: the higher Amara rose, the more obvious Serena's bitterness became. People started noticing. Investors, socialites, even friends began exchanging knowing looks whenever Serena started her little games. But did that stop her? Of course not. When jealousy's running the show, common sense rarely gets a seat at the table. And here's where I have to pause and ask, have you ever had someone who just couldn't stand to see you happy? The type who studies your smile like it's an insult to their existence. Drop a comment if you know the type, because trust me, Amara knew that type all too well. Still, she never let it change her. That's what made her so dangerous in Serena's eyes. Every time Amara brushed off an insult, Serena lost a little more ground. Every graceful exit Amara made was another reminder that Serena couldn't touch her. But jealousy, left unchecked, doesn't just fade, it escalates. And Serena's envy was a ticking clock, winding tighter with every event, every smile, every moment Amara stood taller without even trying. It wasn't a matter of if Serena would explode. It was a matter of when, and when it finally happened, she'd make the biggest mistake of her life. The night of the gala was supposed to be flawless. A celebration of wealth, power, and philanthropy, dressed up in glittering gowns and black-tie tuxedos. The red carpet glowed under camera flashes. Chauffeurs lined the street with polished black cars. Inside, the ballroom shimmered crystal chandeliers casting golden light over marble floors, a string quartet weaving soft music through the air. It was the kind of evening designed to impress. And Amara? She didn't just fit in, she eclipsed the room. She wore a deep emerald gown that hugged her frame like it had been made for her alone. Diamonds glinted at her ears, but it wasn't the jewelry that turned heads. It was her presence, calm, radiant, the kind of elegance that couldn't be bought, no matter how much money you had. As she moved through the crowd, people leaned closer, eager to catch her smile, to hear her laugh. And Marcus, ever the proud husband, never hovered or overshadowed her. He let her shine, standing nearby with that quiet strength that said, "I'm here, and I'll always have her back." Together, they were untouchable, unless, of course, you were Serena. Serena had arrived late, already with a drink in hand. Her gown was extravagant but just a little too loud, as though she tried too hard to grab the spotlight that never seemed to land on her. And as she watched Amara move gracefully from one conversation to the next, laughing with investors, chatting effortlessly with city officials, her envy thickened like smoke in her chest. She downed another glass of champagne. Then another. By the time Amara was at the center of a small crowd telling a story that had the mayor chuckling and even the most stoic guests smiling, Serena's mask had cracked. Her smile was too wide, her laugh too sharp. She leaned on her chair as though the room itself tilted under the weight of her bitterness. And then, she snapped. She crossed the ballroom with her heels clicking like a countdown. People noticed. Conversations faltered. Even the string quartet seemed to play quieter as she closed the distance. "Amara," she began, her voice laced with syrup and spite, "you certainly know how to perform." Amara turned, calm as ever. "Good evening, Serena. I didn't realize you were here." That alone should have been enough to end it, a graceful dismissal. But Serena wasn't interested in grace. "Of course I'm here," Serena said, too loud now. "Not all of us get to stand in the spotlight just because we married well." The crowd shifted uneasily. A few nervous chuckles. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" But Amara didn't bite. She simply smiled, the kind of smile that said Serena's words hadn't landed where she wanted them to. And that smile drove Serena mad. "You think you're better than the rest of us, don't you?" Serena spat, stepping closer. Her words slurred just enough to betray the champagne. "Walking around like you own the room. But let's be real, Amara. Without Marcus, who would you even be?" The hush that fell over the group was deafening. Every eye was on Amara now, not because they believed Serena, but because they were waiting. How would she respond? Would she finally snap? But Amara didn't flinch. She looked Serena dead in the eye, calm as a still lake. And she said, softly but firmly, "I know exactly who I am." "Do you?" That's when Serena lost it. Her hand flew faster than anyone expected. Smack! The sound cracked through the ballroom, louder than the music, louder than the whispers. Amara's head turned with the impact. her hair catching the light as gasps rippled across the room. A camera flash went off. Someone dropped their glass. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Serena stood there, chest heaving, a smug smile curling at her lips as if she believed she'd finally cut Amara down to size. She glanced around, expecting nods, whispers of agreement, maybe even applause, but what she got instead was silence. Cold, stunned, horrified silence, because in that moment, Serena had forgotten one very important detail. She hadn't just slapped any woman. She had slapped Marcus's wife, and Marcus, he was already moving toward them, his expression unreadable, but his presence heavy enough to make Serena's false confidence waver. It was only then, when the cameras refocused on her, when the whispers turned sharp, when the weight of her mistake began to sink in, that Serena realized what she'd done. She thought she'd made her point. She had no idea she'd just signed her own social death warrant. So let me ask you, if someone humiliated you in public, would you stay calm or react instantly? Be honest, because Amara, she didn't need to lift a finger. The world was about to handle Serena for her. The slap hung in the air like smoke after a firework. Sharp, shocking, impossible to ignore. For a long, frozen second, nobody moved. Champagne flutes hovered midair. Pens scratched furiously across reporters' notepads. Investors leaned into each other, whispering, "Did that really just happen?" A photographer lowered his camera, staring as if his lens had betrayed him, and at the center of it all stood Amara. She didn't flinch again. She didn't cry. She didn't lash out. Her hand never rose to her cheek. Instead, she straightened, spine tall, chin lifted, her eyes fixed forward like a queen acknowledging a nuisance rather than an enemy. The silence wasn't her weakness. It was her weapon. That was the moment everyone realized Amara didn't need to defend herself. The room was already doing it for her. Then, Marcus moved. He didn't rush. He didn't roar. His steps were measured, deliberate, each one pulling the air tighter around Serena. By the time he reached his wife's side, the crowd had parted like water, their gazes shifting between curiosity and fear. He took Amara's hand gently, the way you might steady a priceless vase after an earthquake. His jaw was set, his expression unreadable, but you could feel it, the fury beneath the surface. Controlled, dangerous, simmering like steel pulled from fire. "Are you all right?" His voice was low, only for her. "I'm fine," Amara answered, steady as stone. And she was, but Serena was unraveling. At first, she stood proud, chest puffed out as though expecting applause. But the silence stretched too long. The stares turned too sharp. The whispers no longer sounded like approval, they sounded like knives. She actually slapped her. Unbelievable. What was she thinking? Serena's smugness flickered. Her smile twitched. She looked to her circle of so-called friends for support, but they avoided her eyes, suddenly very interested in their drinks or their phones. The power she thought she'd gained slipped through her fingers like sand. And Marcus. Oh, Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He turned to Serena, his tone calm, almost polite. But there was no mistaking the weight behind his words. "Serena," he said slowly, "in this city, reputations take years to build, seconds to destroy. Do you understand what you've just done?" Serena opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Not wit, not venom, just silence, because this wasn't just Marcus, the man. This was Marcus, the millionaire, the philanthropist, the man whose signature could make or break careers. Investors listened when he spoke. Media followed his lead, and every person in that ballroom knew it. Serena had wanted to humiliate Amara. Instead, she'd humiliated herself in front of every camera, every reporter, every gatekeeper of the life she was so desperate to climb into. And Amara, she hadn't said a single word. She didn't need to. Her dignity stood taller than any slap could reach. By the time the string quartet stumbled back into music, the room had already shifted. Conversations resumed, but the topic was the same. Serena's downfall had begun. And here's the thing, Serena knew it too. Her hands shook as she reached for her glass. The champagne no longer tasted like victory. It tasted like ashes. That was the irony. She had walked into the night determined to tear Amara down, convinced people would cheer her boldness. Instead, she was the pariah, her name already tarnished. Her moment of power replayed in whispers that cut sharper than any blade. "I'll tell you this much," she may have landed the slap, but Amara had won the war of perception, and Marcus, he wasn't about to let it stop there. He leaned closer to Amara, his voice low but certain. "We're not letting this go," and she nodded once, her hand tightening around his. Because if Serena thought that slap was the climax, she was wrong. It was only the beginning. So let me ask you, if this happened to your partner, what would you have done right then and there? Serena thought she'd won. For a fleeting moment, maybe she believed that slap would echo as proof of her dominance. But the truth, the war was just beginning. And Marcus didn't fight with fists. He fought with influence. The very next morning, his phone was alive. Not with outrage, not with threats, with calm, deliberate conversations. A quick call to the charity's board. You've seen the footage. Do you really want someone like that tied to your event? Another call to a major sponsor. Her name is trending, but not in a way that helps your brand. Marcus never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His tone was measured, precise, laced with authority that carried more weight than any headline. By the time he hung up, the dominoes were already lined up, ready to fall. Meanwhile, Amara played her role perfectly. She didn't post a statement. She didn't cry to the press. She didn't fan the flames. She let silence do the work. And that silence was deafening, because when the victim doesn't scramble, doesn't beg for sympathy, people notice. They wonder. They take sides. And almost always, they side with dignity. Serena, on the other hand, she scrambled hard. Within days, invitations that had always come like clockwork suddenly stopped. A gala she bragged about attending every year. We regret to inform you your seat has been reassigned. A fashion launch where she'd planned to strut in borrowed diamonds. Unfortunately, we're at capacity, she called friends, but their answers were clipped, evasive. So sorry, I'm busy, let's catch up soon. Translation, we don't want your scandal touching us. In the media, oh, Marcus made sure they had just enough oxygen to keep the fire alive. A subtle leak here, a whispered detail there. One outlet ran the headline, Socialite slaps philanthropist's wife at gala, career suicide. Another framed it harsher, jealousy on display, Serena's public meltdown. Every article tightened the news. At first, Serena tried to fight back. She issued a statement, all fake smiles and hollow apologies. It was a misunderstanding. Alcohol was involved. But the footage didn't lie. The slap had been crisp, deliberate, dripping with malice. No PR spin could erase that, and Amara, she still said nothing, just kept showing up to charity luncheons, board meetings, quiet dinners with Marcus, always radiant, always unbothered. Every picture of her smiling only made Serena look worse. The contrast was brutal. Sponsors began pulling out of Serena's projects. Partnerships dissolved. One by one, doors that had been wide open slammed shut. She wasn't just losing status, she was losing money. I'll never forget this part. Someone in Serena's inner circle leaked a text thread to the press. In it, Serena ranted about Amara, calling her unworthy and lucky to be a millionaire's arm candy. The racism wasn't even veiled, it was raw. Ugly, undeniable, and just like that, the whispers became roars. She wasn't just a bitter social climber anymore. She was branded exactly what she was: cruel, envious, and bigoted. Her fall wasn't loud. It was quiet, silent, precise. Marcus didn't need to stand on a stage and declare revenge. He simply shifted the currents until Serena was drowning. And here's the kicker, Serena had always believed her world revolved around her ability to charm, to manipulate, to play games in glittering rooms. But when those rooms closed, when those invitations vanished, she was nothing. No stage, no audience, no power. Amara watched it all unfold without lifting a finger. Her restraint was almost poetic. Because the absence of reaction, that's what killed Serena most. She wanted Amara to fight back, to snap, to prove she was rattled. But Amara's calm told the world everything. Serena was beneath her. Within a month, Serena's name was poison. Investors avoided her. Photographers turned their cameras away. Even gossip blogs, which once fed on her drama, dropped her entirely. Why? Because there's nothing entertaining about a villain who's lost all her shine. And Marcus, he kept moving forward, as if nothing had happened. His businesses thrived, his charity grew, and his wife remained the picture of elegance. Together, they didn't just survive the scandal, they owned it. By the end of that season, Serena wasn't just forgotten. She was erased. So let me ask you, what's your favorite story of instant karma? Share it in the comments, I'd love to hear them. Because trust me, Serena's story, it was just getting started. Serena thought she could talk her way out of it. That's what people like her always believed. When money and arrogance had shielded you your whole life, consequences felt optional. She released a statement, polished and hollow. Something about being provoked, about the pressure of the gala environment, about how she'd had a little too much champagne. But nobody was buying it. The footage was everywhere, every angle, every second of that slap looping on social media. And here's the thing about video, it doesn't lie. The malice in her eyes, the smug tilt of her chin, the deliberate swing of her hand, it was all there, crystal clear. People online tore her apart. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, take your pick. Memes popped up overnight. Screenshots of her frozen mid-swing, captioned with things like, "When jealousy takes the wheel," or "POV, you just ended your own career." Her name was trending for all the wrong reasons. And the comments, brutal. Imagine having that much hate in your heart. She thought she was untouchable. Guess again, protect black women. Always. Meanwhile, Amara, she stayed silent. And that silence was louder than any press release Serena could dream of. Every day she remained calm. Every time she appeared in public with that effortless grace, it only sharpened the contrast. Amara was admired. Serena was despised. Serena's so-called friends saw the writing on the wall. The brunch invites vanished. Group chats went mysteriously quiet. The people who used to laugh at her cruel little jokes about Amara now avoided her entirely. Why? Because being associated with Serena was social suicide. She tried to cling to them. She called, texted, begged. "You know I didn't mean it that way. You know she provoked me," but the responses were cold. One even said, "Sorry, Serena. I have to protect my brand." That one stung, and while Serena spiraled, Amara only rose higher. News outlets ran glowing features about her charity work. Photos of her at other events circulated online, always stunning, always poised. The more Serena fought to claw back relevance, the more irrelevant she became. Marcus didn't even need to move another chess piece. The game was already over. Serena's deals collapsed. Sponsors cut ties. She lost speaking engagements, partnerships, and the friends who'd once treated her like royalty. In less than a month, she went from being a staple of the social scene to being whispered about like a cautionary tale. And the irony, the humiliation she tried to inflict on Amara circled back and swallowed her whole. By the time she realized it, it was too late. Her reputation was gone. Her influence was gone. And no amount of spin could save her. So let me ask you, what do you think Marcus should do? Should he forgive her, or let her sink for good? Do you think Marcus should forgive her, or let her sink? Personally, I think we already know the answer. By now, Serena had realized something she should have understood the moment her hand left Amara's face. Power isn't just about who hits first. It's about who stands after the storm. Her calls began cautiously, almost timidly. "Marcus, I wanted to apologize," she stammered into the phone, voice cracking. But Marcus didn't answer. Not right away. Not at first. So she escalated. Emails followed. Each one longer, more desperate, more flailing. "I didn't mean it. I was provoked. I've lost perspective." The words piled up like a confession, a litany of guilt and panic. But the recipients didn't respond. Or when they did, it was curt, businesslike. Not the validation Serena craved. Next came the letter, handwritten, in flowing cursive that once charmed anyone who read it. She described her regret in vivid detail, tried to justify herself, tried to weave herself back into favor. She folded it carefully, imagining the apology would open doors. Instead, it landed in Marcus's office and remained unopened on his desk for hours. And when he finally glanced at it, he didn't scold. He didn't ridicule. He set it aside. Amara never addressed it, never gossiped about it, never posted a subtle clapback online. She let Serena unravel under the weight of her own misjudgment. Because sometimes, silence is the most cutting statement of all. Then Serena appeared in person. She showed up at Marcus's office one rainy afternoon, clutching a damp coat and shaking in her heels. The high walls of the building seemed to dwarf her. When she met Marcus's eyes, she tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Tears ran down her face, unpracticed and raw. I am so sorry," she whispered, voice breaking. "I never should have. I don't know what I was thinking. Please, I'll do anything." Marcus didn't raise his voice, didn't step forward. He simply waited, calm, unflinching. His presence alone reminded her that authority and dignity were not things she could steal. Amara finally approached. She didn't need to lecture, didn't need to gloat. She looked Serena in the eye and said softly, "Some things can't be undone." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't petty. It was true. And that truth struck Serena harder than any slap could have. Her shoulders sagged. Her knees almost buckled. She had begged, pleaded, wept, and nothing could erase what she had done. Power had shifted completely. Serena, frantic and begging, had lost everything. her confidence, her influence, even her audience. Amara, serene and unshaken, had remained untouchable not through revenge, but through poise, dignity, and restraint. Sometimes, the loudest revenge is the silence that follows, and in that silence, Serena understood it fully. Every whisper, every social media post, every pulled invitation, it had all been a consequence of her own choices. And now, for the first time, she was forced to live with them. And no amount of money, no pleading, no frantic apologies could rewrite the moment. Amara's grace and Marcus's control had ensured that Serena's fall was complete, and as she turned to leave Marcus's office, defeated, the weight of her humiliation pressed down like gravity. There were no cameras, no headlines, just the quiet certainty that she had crossed a line she could never come back from. Amara didn't celebrate. She didn't mock. She simply continued on with her life, leaving Serena to reckon with the consequences of her own choices. And that, in the end, was enough. Months had passed since the gala that changed everything. The city had moved on, the social calendars had rotated, but the memory of that night lingered like smoke in a room long after the fire had gone out. Amara and Marcus, however, weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Stronger, steadier, more connected than ever. Every event they attended now seemed effortless. Every interaction tinged with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've endured a storm and emerged unshaken. Marcus leaned back in his office chair, reviewing quarterly reports, but his eyes often drifted to the window, where the city skyline stretched endless and shimmering. "We did the right thing," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. Amara, seated across from him, smiled without a hint of arrogance. "We always do." It wasn't about revenge anymore. That chapter had closed. What remained was influence earned through integrity, respect earned through poise. People admired them not out of fear, not because of money, but because they had proven that dignity could outshine malice. Serena, on the other hand, was a different story. Once the darling of the social scene, she had become a cautionary tale. Invitations she once flaunted now went unanswered. Deals she'd counted on vanished without explanation. And her so-called friends? They had moved on, leaving her to navigate the wreckage of her own making. She appeared occasionally in gossip columns, usually under headlines dripping with irony. Socialite slaps philanthropist's wife, career in ruins, or from darling to pariah, Serena's slow fate. The city that once applauded her audacity now whispered about her with pity or worse, scorn. Meanwhile, Amara's quiet ascent continued. She spearheaded charity initiatives, mentoring young women who had been overlooked, undervalued, or underestimated. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. Every action, every decision, carried weight precisely because it was measured, thoughtful, and free of malice. One afternoon, at a gala celebrating urban renewal projects, Amara moved through the crowd as effortlessly as ever. People noticed her grace. They admired her strength. They respected the subtle authority that required no theatrics, no shouting, no self-aggrandizement. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she allowed herself a small, private satisfaction. Serena had once thought she could humiliate Amara. Instead, the universe had done the work. It was poetic. In the quietest way possible, Marcus caught her gaze across the room and raised an eyebrow. "Still smiling," he said with a teasing lilt. "Still smiling," she echoed, a soft laugh escaping her lips. Not from triumph, but from relief. From knowing that calm, composed strength would always outlast arrogance and rage. In reflection, it became clear that the story wasn't about a slap, a fall, or a moment of rage. It was about resilience. About choosing to stand tall when someone tries to drag you down. About letting dignity do the work that anger and revenge could never accomplish. Amara's life wasn't perfect. No one's is. But she had found something more enduring than social approval or fleeting popularity. She had earned peace, respect, and clarity. And with Marcus by her side, she could face anything the world threw at her. Serena's downfall was complete, but Amara never gloated. She didn't need to. The quiet victory, the unwavering composure spoke louder than any words ever could. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful statements aren't shouted from rooftops. They're carried in posture, in restraint, in the simple act of refusing to be dragged down. As the night ended, and the gala lights dimmed, Amara and Marcus stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city lights sparkled, reflected in puddles from a recent rain, and in that moment, there was no malice. No lingering tension, only strength, endurance, and a shared understanding that the worst storms pass, and those who survive them emerge stronger. Because strength isn't about shouting the loudest, it's about standing tall when others try to drag you down. And that, more than anything, is the legacy Amara and Marcus left behind. Serena walked into that gala thinking she could humiliate Amara. She imagined the cameras, the whispers, the subtle nods of approval that would crown her audacity. Instead, she became the cautionary tale everyone whispered about. Every slap, every word of malice, every jealous glance came back to her in ways she never anticipated. And Marcus and Amara, they didn't need to yell, didn't need to confront, didn't need to broadcast their triumph. They let their actions speak. The quiet strength of their composure, the subtle power of influence, and the dignity they maintained through every cruel maneuver, those were the tools that dismantled Serena's world faster than any argument or confrontation could have. There's a lesson in that, isn't there? Revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes, it's in the silence, in the grace under pressure, in proving that arrogance meets its match not with noise, but with calm, unwavering resilience. And Amara's victory wasn't about causing pain. It was about claiming space, asserting respect, and showing the world that poise and patience can outshine malice any day. If you found this story as satisfying as I did, please hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe. These videos take hours to research, write, and edit, and your support truly means the war.